The top business stories live from the Sky Newsroom. Donald Trump touches down in Doha while Boeing wins the single biggest deal in the US playmaker's history with Qatar Airways. We'll speak to the parent company of Manchester's CoOp Live venue about the problems that beset the opening of the UK's biggest indoor arena. And shares in Burberry soar after it announced cuts of as many as 1,700 jobs over the next couple of years. Yeah, very good afternoon on this Wednesday Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. More on those stories in a short while, but first I'm going to bring you some breaking news this afternoon. That is on the sale of the Telegraph newspaper. Long-running saga this. Let's bring in our city editor, Mark Kleiman, who has the details for us. Mark, what have you got?
Yeah, that's right, Darren. I understand that Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, will announce tomorrow proposals for the government to allow foreign state investors to own up to 15% of British national newspapers. Now, this is a significant intervention by the British government because it follows 2 years of unresolved debates and arguments about the future ownership of the Daily Telegraph. Now, you'll remember that the Telegraph, previously owned by the Barclay family, was put into receivership by its main lender, Lloyds Banking Group, 2 years ago exactly. And since then, an Abu Dhabi state-backed investment vehicle called Redbird IMI acquired an option to take control of the Telegraph. Now, after a political outcry last year, that deal was effectively blocked. The government said that there should be an outright state ban on state ownership of British newspapers. And since the autumn of last year, there's been a consultation running to see if that threshold should be lifted. Now, tomorrow, the government will announce that that threshold will be set at 15%. And what that will mean, Darren, is that it paves the way for Redbird IMI to continue with a deal to take ownership of the Telegraph. IMI, which is the Abu Dhabi part of that investor, will still be allowed to own a stake of up to 15% and is likely to continue to pursue that, as I understand it. Redbird, which is an American-based investment vehicle, is seeking separately to raise funding to complete the rest of the deal. So it does look like, after 2 years, that there may finally be some movement towards a resolution around the ownership of the Telegraph. There have, of course, been some other investors who have expressed an interest in buying the Telegraph for about £550 million, but they have struggled to raise the funds to do so. Now, not everybody is going to be pleased, of course, that this 15% cap is going to be imposed, because clearly there are many opponents in relation to press freedom who believe that any state ownership of British national newspapers is a bad thing. Now, Fraser Nelson, the former editor of The Spectator, which was also owned by the Barclay family for many years, has expressed his indignation at this prospect after I revealed this news earlier today. He has said that this is an appalling betrayal of democracy, and I suspect that once Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, makes public her decision tomorrow morning, we are going to see a lot more outcry about the prospect of foreign governments being allowed to own up to 15% of UK national newspapers.
OK, Mark, great stuff as always. Thank you very much indeed, Mark Kleiman there. Now, Donald Trump's tour of the Middle East has continued today in Qatar. Trade was once again top of the president's agenda, and Boeing has won the single biggest deal in the US playmaker's history, with Qatar Airways placing an order for at least 160 wide-body aircraft during that visit. The agreement was signed by the carrier amid a flurry of deals between Gulf nations and the United States during the president's visit to the region. Let's bring in our US correspondent, James Matthews, who is in Washington for us this afternoon. James, very good afternoon to you. Quite significant, this Boeing deal, which has obviously been in a lot of trouble recently. But how is these visits going down domestically? It was interesting for me yesterday watching President Trump's speech. I mean, most of the speech was very clearly aimed at the domestic home American audience.
Yeah, hi, Darren. Reaction here actually is split down the middle, as you might expect. Supporters of Trump say this is a pioneering president who is changing the face of the Middle East for the better, has brought a fresh eye and approach to the politics and at the same time is making money and creating jobs for the United States. Opponents, they dismiss it as Trump showing himself to be a president for sale, one who is normalizing corruption in corrupt countries. The business of today, as you pointed out, relates to Qatar Airways, the state carrier. It is buying these planes from Boeing, the US manufacturer, of course. Donald Trump more than happy to be the face of that deal. He's called it the largest ever order of the jets in question, 160, as you said, Darren. It's a business arrangement to cement ties between these countries. That's certainly how it's being portrayed. The Emir of Qatar characterizing it as both countries going to another level of relationship, he said. No confirmation, I might say, on the deal on that Qatari plane, the very one that the Qataris want to give to Trump as a new Air Force One. That remains on the tarmac in Texas while discussions continue on the legalities, ethics, optics, and so on. So, of course, this deal, it follows yesterday, Saudi Arabia, the deals on energy, tech, defense, and so on. So the dollar signs are stacking up for Donald Trump in an itinerary structured around business deals, but of course, on a trip laced with politics, many moving parts, not least where he is right now in Qatar. Trump has the opportunity to make headway on Gaza. One would suppose Doha being the very place where the Hamas leadership is based, hosted by the Qataris, who of course have been key mediators on Gaza. Of course, yesterday he met and shook hands with Ahmed al-Sharaa, the Syrian president, one-time anti-American terrorist. So politically, it's fair to say Trump is going places that no president has gone before. This effort to make money, as he would style it, is an effort to fashion a golden age for the Middle East. That's what he called it yesterday. It's all about change, this trip. The question would be, will that change stick, and will it be to the benefit of all who have a stake in it?
OK, James, live for us there in Washington. Thank you very much indeed. We're just getting some more details in, actually, from this deal involving Boeing. It's going to acquire the Qatari is going to acquire 210 Boeing 787 Dreamliners and 777X aircrafts. That's going to be powered by General Electric engines. The deal apparently worth $243 billion. We're just getting a fact sheet from the White House that's detailing all of this. All in all, they are claiming this afternoon, the White House, that President Trump has secured a historic, as they're branding it, $1.2 trillion economic commitment in Qatar. Now, interestingly, that is double what they got from the Saudis yesterday, and we thought it wasn't going to be as big as that. But obviously this is from the White House, so let's get the details first. Maybe Paul might have some for us. Paul, this has just been announced. And again, big numbers.
Absolutely. This is a trip that's been about diplomacy and dollars, but the dollars at the forefront. And this has just dropped from the White House's fact sheet. Donald J. Trump secures historic $1.2 trillion economic commitment in Qatar. Now, I've been running through this while you were talking to James, attempting to make the numbers add up, and all the numbers aren't here, so I can't. In truth, there does, at the very heart of it, is an economic deal, which they say separately spin out $243.5 billion worth of jet purchases, jets and engines from Boeing and General Electric. It's been a good week for Boeing.
I mean, they might struggle with the orders, given there's a massive backlog.
Indeed, Saudi Arabia bought some, and in fact, there were $10 billion worth of sales from the owners of British Airways, tied into last week's UK trade deal. What this announcement does do, aside from trumpeting the president's great achievements, as they put it, in making American manufacturing great again, is a defence deal, big order of drones and unpiloted aircraft made by Raytheon by the Qatar government, so defence as well as manufacturing, civilian manufacturing there. It talks about American companies involved in the components and infrastructure for Qatar's LNG industry, and a big science and tech conglomerate, Parsons, who've done, this press release says, nearly $100 billion worth of deals With Qatar, interesting, it also talks about 300 billion pounds of 3 billion, forgive me, of investment committed by Qatar into the United States. And here's the interesting thing here. President Trump's talking about the inward investment he's attracting, but this matters to Doha and Qatar as it matters to Saudi Arabia, because these are countries looking to leverage and use this huge mineral wealth, liquid natural gas when it comes to Qatar and oil when it comes to Saudi Arabia, in diversifying their economy. And there's no bigger consumer market and no bigger market for that investment than the United States. So these strong relations and these economic deals, what they do have is dollars to invest. That's also buying presence and corporate presence and might in the US market for Gulf state companies. That in the long term, which is how these leaders are looking. They have multi-year horizons for transforming their economies with this money. It's good news for them too, but at the moment the good news is certainly being proclaimed by Donald Trump on this deal.
OK, Paul, we'll keep across those details. Thank you very much indeed. Paul Casso live with us in the studio. Let's bring up to date with some of the rest of the business news this afternoon. And shares in the luxury brand Burberry have soared after it announced it could cut as many as 1,700 jobs by 2027 as part of efforts to slash costs and return to profit. It made an operating loss of £3 million in its last financial year, compared with £418 million profit the year before. The cost-cutting measure would reduce the workforce by a fifth. US chipmaker NVIDIA will partner with Saudi Arabia's AI startup and will ship 18,000 semiconductors to the nation to help power a new data center project. The partnership with the sovereign wealth fund owned Humane was announced as part of Donald Trump's trip to the Middle East. Microsoft has embarked on its largest job cuts in over 2 years by laying off 6,000 members of staff. Almost 3% of the entire workforce have lost their jobs as the tech giant refocuses spending on artificial intelligence. The mass layoffs come just weeks after reporting strong sales and profits in the first quarter of the year. And you can get more on that, indeed the rest of the business news, on the Sky News Money blog. All you need to do, scan that QR code that's on your screen right now to access the Money blog on the Sky News app. Now, the opening of the biggest arena in the UK was partly anticipated last year. That was before CoOp Live Arena in Manchester was plagued with problems before it managed to open its doors. However, the venue has had a marked turnaround since its troubled birth, and this week is even hosting Bruce Springsteen for several performances. Well, Tim Leakey is the chief executive of the Oakview Group. That's CoOp's live parent company. And I asked him what went wrong with the opening of the arena.
What's unique in our industry is if you look at stadiums, for example, Wembley and Tottenham, if you look at what some of the new stadiums, Everton, for example, are going through now, it is not easy this day and age to get these things built on time. What's unique about what we do is, unlike a commercial development where you could keep on pushing it back, when we have set dates for matches and games or set dates for concerts, we have a schedule that we had to hit, and trying to predict that schedule with general contractors, subcontractors, and 15,000 workers that eventually built this arena, it's not a fine art. You take a bit of a risk. And so the first 30 days were tricky. But then since we've opened up, what's shocking and amazing is this is now one of the top 2 arenas internationally in the world with the O2. And it's had an unbelievable run of 105 shows, even though we lost the first few months.
And you talked quite emotionally about how difficult that whole experience was. And in part, you blamed it on labour shortages, maybe fueled by Brexit. Do you feel that those issues have now been sorted?
Well, they have for us. Once we took the building over and assumed control, got it open, we operated. So we have 1,500 employees that work for us in this venture. We have a partnership with City Football Group. So we have a 200-acre campus with Etihad Stadium, the new hotel that City Football Group's building, which will be the largest hotel in all of Manchester, right across from CoOp Live. So our ability now to use best practices, when you have 72,000 employees and you do 700 plus facilities, the great news is I could throw my management team, my expertise, all of the people that know how to operate these things, we could come together and ultimately manage this day to day. That's why we've had such great success here. It's also why we could go out and convince Bruce Springsteen to do 3 nights in this arena. And it's the only arena play that Bruce is doing. He's doing stadiums in every other city. So it's good to have that experience. We've been doing this for 40 plus years. We have a lot of people that ultimately know how to operate. We just had to get the building built and finished so we could take it over and open it.
But are we frustrating, Tim? I suppose that's the question. Some would suggest we haven't got enough builders to build homes, let alone music venues. There's planning permission issues. There was meant to be that big dome in East London that didn't happen. Is the UK a frustrating place to operate for businesses like yours?
No, if it was, we wouldn't be talking about building another arena. I find you to be lovely. I think it's the second most important market for my company. We're spending more money in the UK than anywhere else in the world outside the US. Our ability to commit to a great arena in London, our ability to commit to another arena or two elsewhere in the UK, we wouldn't be doing that if we didn't believe in this country, we didn't believe in the economy, and we didn't believe in the new trade agreement that the US just negotiated with the UK.
That was Tim Lykewicki, who, from the Oak View Group, clearly so excited he was losing his voice by the end of that interview. OK, you're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll be looking at how the markets are doing. FTSE down a fraction this afternoon. We'll have all the details after this break.
Show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
1,500 movies? I don't want this flight to end. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Very welcome back. Let's have a look at how the markets are doing this afternoon and bring in Emma Wall, Head of Platform Investments at Hargreaves Lansdown. Emma, as always, a pleasure. Let's start with Burberry. What is going on there?
Well, 1,700 jobs to go, and the shares have jumped 17%. This is all part of the master plan of the new incoming CEO, Josh Schulman, who has had great success on the other side of the pond with the likes of Coach. This is to amount £100 million savings announced today, so the jobs themselves will cut around 60 million is expected, and a further 40 million. However, one of the things that I would flag is there are rumours in fashion land that Daniel Lee, who so far has been a pretty successful creative director for Burberry, is potentially leaving. So that'll be one to watch. But good news in terms of the market so far.
We spent a lot of time talking about Donald Trump this week in the Middle East, clearly. Back home, not necessarily all bad news either, in the sense that inflation has not ticked up by as much as people had expected in the United States.
Yeah, I'm sorry to pour cold water and be a Debbie Downer, but we're not that optimistic about inflation. We've actually just run our quarterly investment strategy, and one of the things that we're looking at is, yes, we've had trade deals, and yes, we're having trade talks, but we can't ignore the fact the last 6 weeks have seen significant market turmoil. And following Liberation Day, so-called, we did see significant amounts of cancellations in terms of, across the world, executives actually cancelling orders. And because of that, we expect to see a supply-demand mismatch. So although for now it looks like the worst of the kind of trade turmoil is behind us, or at least we have a 90-day reprieve for the worst of it, actually we expect there to be a lag and for that to come and show in inflation on both sides of the pond. So inflation, although it's the downward trajectory on a multi-year view, we do think over the next 3 to 6 months we could potentially see an uptick there. Here in the UK, a lot of the impact will come from rising services and also from the fact that the EU remains our biggest trading bloc, and of course the US and the EU still haven't done a deal. It's one of the areas that Trump's rhetoric remains quite negative on, and it's one of the things that we should expect to see come through to GDP figures. UK GDP expected tomorrow morning, I should say, 0.6% for the first 3 months of the year, up significantly on this time last year, which was 0.1%. But again, we're pretty cautious on that. So it's a positive figure, but actually the next 3 to 6 months expect to remain challenged for markets, inflation and GDP.
And just on that GDP figures, as you say, going to come out tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. What's your expectation if they are reasonably robust? Why the drag then going forwards?
I mean, it's very much linked to the tariffs and the fact that actually, if you look under the hood at inflation in the UK, even if you take the tariffs out, although it has been trending down, we are still seeing the impact of rising jobs data. So if you think about the fact that national insurance contributions ticked up and that's got to be absorbed somewhere, you've got to think about the fact that across the public sector, you've seen significant wage rises and the fact that the services services inflation was quite sticky. Then you add on to that tariff turmoil. As I said, we expect this to be a blip. It is transient. The trend of inflation is moving downwards, but we do expect there to be an inflation blip upwards. And that indeed will come through to GDP as well, because often, inflation pressures on GDP mean GDP down. So data tomorrow out of GDP will be positive, but we're just cautious pessimistic over the next 3 to 6 months.
And this, just very briefly, Emma, of course, is all ahead of, the government's got the spending review and the industrial strategy to come within the next month.
It has indeed, and of course it's still got the autumn budget to go. The industrial strategy, I think, will very much set the stall for the upcoming autumn budget, and the autumn budget is where you'll see actually the bulk of measures. One of the things that this government has committed to is balancing the books, and we remain reasonably wary about whether that's possible, particularly given inflation pressures and the fact that gilt yields remain so high. That 10-year gilt yield has in fact risen again despite interest rate cuts last week.
OK, Emma, great stuff, as always, live for us there in Bristol. Thank you very much indeed, Emma Wall. OK, that is it from me on Business Live. Back tomorrow morning, of course, at 11:30. Do join me then if you can. Up next, it is the News Hour with Mark Austin in London. Yalda is in Doha. Stay tuned for that. Sam Coates has got some breaking political news as well. I will see you, though, tomorrow morning at 11:30.